Welcome to this lecture entitled Historical and Heritage Tourism. What is historical and heritage tourism? The National Trust for Historic Preservation defines it as, quote, traveling to experience the places, artifacts, and activities that authentically represent the stories and people of the past. And heritage tourism can also include cultural, historical, and natural resources. For example, cultural resources might be the Mississippi Blues Trail or the Tenement House Museum in New York City. Natural resources can be anything in natural history, like the national monuments, Mount Rushmore, Moab, Zion National Park, El Capitan, and Yosemite, and similar artifacts. Well, who are historical and heritage tourists? Well, they are a market, and they exist nationally and internationally, and they provide a great deal of economic benefit to those places that they come in large enough numbers to exert some economic effect. We err when we believe that such tourists are some kind of undifferentiated mass, as Timothy Dallin and Stephen Boyd try to avoid calling them. Heritage or historic tourism is a distinct form of tourism, and it is the oldest form of tourism. We noticed an uptick in this kind of tourism after World War II, especially from the U.S. to other places, particularly Europe, because of affluence. The United States was the most prosperous country in the world between about 1945 and approximately 1970. That affluence, particularly in the 1950s and 1960s, led to a great deal of tourism around the world. It even led to the creation of what used to be called the jet set. What do these people seek when they become heritage and historic tourists? They seek a quality called authenticity, that is, realism, not manufactured, but something that really tells them how it used to be. They also seek quality, and authenticity and quality are interactive. That is, you can't have a squalid area, even if you are doing something like a tenement or an encampment or a rundown fort. So they want quality, but they don't want things to be too far off of what it would have been like at the very beginning of the historic site, for example, its creation. Jamestown is not supposed to be perceived by such tourists as during the dying time, during the starving time, the hard year of 1609 to 1610. No, these tourists want an authentic experience, but they don't want a squalid experience. This is a hard line to make. It's a hard mark to make, and it's easy to cross that line. Disney is often accused of putting quality before authenticity in order to make people comfortable, but presenting them with a sanitized version of what that history might actually have been. Historic and heritage tourists are important because of their direct economic impact on an area. They have a tendency to spend more money than other kinds of tourists. They also have a tendency to stay longer and to visit more sites. This may be a function of prosperity and age. Around the time that healthy adults begin to retire is about the same time of their lives that they begin experiencing a different interpersonal connection with what they find to be historical. Consequently, their feeling about history and their prosperity and ability to go places, see things, stay for a while without the pressure of kids or jobs to return to, means that they are willing to spend more money and to stay longer and to visit more places. They can also increase the local preservation ethos. If developers see a market in heritage tourism, they're less likely to begin tearing down historical artifacts, historical buildings, bulldozing historical sites to make room for some kind of money-making project. Who then are the purveyors of historical tourism? What you might call central office in the United States is the National Trust for Historic Preservation. Also, the National Park Service is a purveyor of historical and heritage tourism, particularly in their on-again, off-again program of designating national heritage corridors. There are also state organizations such as historic commissions, arts commission, folk life and folklore organizations. In Alabama, that might be the Alabama Historic Commission, the Historic Chattahoochee Commission, the Alabama Council on the Arts. There are private groups as well that are often led by tourism professionals in league with historical, heritage, and folk life professionals. One of these is the Cultural Heritage Tourism Alliance, that it has a presence on the web. Another is the New York Cultural Heritage Tourism Network. These are two good examples of private groups that combine tourism and historical professionals in order to create places and sites that tourists can visit. Most of these organizations try to create and implement tourism projects, and the National Trust for Historic Preservation has developed 4 steps for getting started with a heritage tourism project. Let me go through these steps as you see them here, one at a time, and explain them a little more thoroughly. The first step for getting started in a heritage or historic tourism project is to assess the potential of your local area. You assess the availability of attractions, that is, those historical and heritage tourism sites. You assess the visitor services that your area currently can offer or might be able to offer in the future. You assess the capacity of the area to absorb and handle tourists that might come to it. If you have a tourist area in, for example, the middle of nowhere without any facilities around, then tourists may come to the site, but then they're going to have to leave in order to spend the night or something like that. And that has a tendency to cut down on the ability of a project to develop. You also need to assess the protection ethos in the community. Does the community actually want to protect the site that is going to be developed as a project for a history or heritage tourism marketing campaign? And then finally, you have to assess your capability for marketing itself. In step 2, plan and organize. To sustain heritage tourism, you need resources and partners. So plan and organize your project around local government, business, and service organization partners. Include a good financial plan. All of this kind of development is similar to any other kind of development. It's about economics as much as it is about the project's goals and the sites that you want tourists to come to. Especially when you're dealing with partners and planning and organizing, you really have to come up with a business plan that has a good, solid financial component to it. Step 3 is to prepare, protect, and manage. That is, prepare for visitors by increasing clear communications. Think in the long term. Build a strong tourism employee base. Develop a protective infrastructure around the historical or heritage resource, like zoning laws, designation as a historical district, local ordinances about signs, things like that. Also, create a robust management plan and infrastructure. Finally, market. That's the fourth step for getting started in a historical tourism project. You need public relations. Create a press kit. Create friendly reporters. Create newsworthy events that draw the attention of reporters who need stories. Invest in advertising. That's different from public relations. Advertising requires you to pay to provide information to targeted audiences. And don't forget public service announcements on television and radio. Broadcasters, old school broadcasters, are required by the Federal Communications Commission to devote a small amount of time to public service announcements, and they do these things for free. This is a very good way of getting the word out about any newsworthy events or about the presence every so often of, just remind people of the presence of your heritage and historical tourism area. Marketing requires you to have graphic and online materials. Think in terms of an image package, and it requires you to promote. For example, you have direct contact with consumers via contests, direct mail, posters, table tents, and other forms of direct communication, including mass emails when you can do so. Now, the National Trust for Historic Preservation also suggests that you operate such a project under 5 guiding principles. And just like in the last one, let me elaborate on them as I cite them. The first principle is to collaborate. That is, build local and regional partnerships to develop themes, pool resources, market effectively, and have a more attractive product. The second of their 5 guiding principles is, quote unquote, find the fit. That is, work within your local capacity and your local resources. Stay within local history. Contextualize what you want to contextualize, but remember that the real focus is the locality and the history of that site or that local area. That's what people are coming to you for, not for some glossed over national overview of history, but for how the local site operated, occurred, existed authentically and with a certain level of quality, and then you can contextualize it into the state or national or international historical arena. Make your sites and your programs come alive. Ensure that sites tell stories and give visitors ways to participate and to interact. Always focus on authenticity and quality. With so much homogenized culture, visitors want a sense of place, your place. Give them high quality, but a real local experience. Finally, preserve and protect. Use the momentum of heritage tourism to implement preservation ethos and practices for physical structures and for ways of life. Now, what direct connections are there between heritage tourism and public history? Public history works on sites and enhancement projects. Public history is able to put sites into context. Public history acts as on-site interpreters. Public historians can conceptualize projects and enhance them, and public historians provide legitimacy and fundraising ability. Well, with all of this said, We can say that historical and heritage tourism is a site of potential employment, potential professional activity of public historians. It's something that's coming down the pike. It's something that many localities are becoming involved in because as the service economy expands, tourism is one of those things that has a lower impact for a higher return. It's economically responsible and economically feasible. And with that, I want to thank you yet again for listening to my lecture.